In the shadowed hills of Brentwood, Los Angeles, stands a modest, Spanish-style house with white stucco walls and a red tile roof. Known to be Marilyn Monroe's final residence, this house remains a landmark, though it has developed a reputation that few dare to explore. It's been said that her spirit lingers, and that even the stillness of night doesn't bring peace to her memory. One foggy evening, a couple who had recently moved into the home decided to spend the weekend organizing and setting up their belongings. It was only their third night there, and they had noticed an odd calmness about the place and eerie silence. Around midnight, as they lay in bed, they heard soft whispers that seemed to drift down the hallway, faint but unmistakable. The words were unclear, but the sound held a sadness that chilled them. The couple tried to dismiss it as old pipes or the house settling. The next evening, as the woman unpacked boxes in the living room, she felt a presence behind her, close enough to make her hair stand on end. She turned, expecting to see her partner, but no one was there. She laughed it off, but as she turned back, she caught a glimpse of light, a soft, flickering glow reflecting on the window. It was as if someone was holding a candle just behind her, even though she knew she was alone in that room. A few nights later, they invited some friends over, hoping laughter and company would dispel the odd feeling. But just as they began to share drinks in the living room, the lights suddenly dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of candlelight on Marilyn's portrait that hung in the room. Everyone stared at the portrait in an unsettling silence as a strange chill washed over the room. One friend, sensing an eerie presence, asked the couple about the night Marilyn had passed away there, a question they had avoided since moving in. And that's when they heard it. A low, sorrowful hum, like a woman humming a melody they couldn't place. The tune floated down the hallway, hovering in the air before fading as suddenly as it had started. The couple shared a look, chills running down their spines. From that night forward, the humming became a familiar sound in the Brentwood house, always returning at the quietest moments. The couple learned to live alongside it, feeling as if Marilyn's spirit was simply continuing her life within her last sanctuary, perhaps hoping someone would listen to the story her voice still tried to tell. The weeks went by, and the couple began to notice other oddities. Small, subtle changes, items left in one place would mysteriously move to another. The faint scent of Chanel No. 5 would occasionally waft through the hallway, though neither of them owned perfume. The house took on a strange energy, as if it had a life and presence of its own, as though every part of it was steeped in a memory. One evening, as the woman returned home late from work, she found the house unusually quiet. She stepped into the living room and felt a sharp drop in temperature, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. She shivered, closing the door, and that's when she noticed something strange. An old, handwritten note lying on the side table by the sofa, one she knew hadn't been there before. The note was written in a hurried, delicate script that appeared old and faded, as though scrawled by someone in a state of desperation. She picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling as she read the faint words. "Please listen. I just need someone to know." The woman's heart pounded as she felt an odd pull from somewhere deeper in the house, like an invisible thread drawing her toward Marilyn's bedroom. Against every instinct screaming at her to leave, she slowly made her way down the hallway, the silence pressing down on her with every step. She reached the doorway and stopped, feeling the weight of an unseen presence behind her, watching, waiting. The room was darker than usual, as though the shadows had gathered more thickly, and a strange, cold breeze brushed past her face, despite the windows being shut. As she crossed the threshold into the bedroom, she was met with a faint flash of light by the vanity, a glint of something metallic catching her eye. She took a step closer and saw an old, silver hand mirror lying on the vanity. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate engravings and a faint fingerprint on its surface, as if someone had recently held it. The woman reached out to touch it, but before her fingers could graze the cool metal, a voice, soft and pleading, whispered from somewhere in the shadows, "Don't go." The words felt so close, almost whispered into her ear, and she spun around, but the room was empty. Her breath quickened as she took a step back, feeling trapped, and then another flicker of light. This time, It wasn't a reflection but an unmistakable, pulsing glow coming from the bedroom mirror. It seemed to shimmer as if lit from within, slowly clearing to reveal a vague, translucent image in the glass. A woman's silhouette, head bowed, hands resting on the vanity. Her face was blurred, but the unmistakable blonde waves of hair were visible, ghostly but hauntingly familiar. The figure in the mirror lifted her head slowly, her eyes meeting the woman's with an expression of deep sadness, and then mouthed two words, her lips barely moving, "Find it." A cold wave of dread washed over the woman as the image faded. She stumbled back, clutching the vanity, her mind racing. Find what? The couple had known the stories, had expected the legends, but this was different. This was real, a message, a plea. She knew in that moment that Marilyn's spirit wasn't just haunting this house. She was trying to communicate something lost, something hidden, something that someone, at long last, was meant to find. Unable to shake the image of Marilyn's ghostly figure and the cryptic message, the woman became obsessed with uncovering the mystery. She combed through the house, scouring every corner and crevice for clues. Days turned into nights, and the more she searched, the stranger the house became. Shadows seemed to lengthen and shift as if they were alive. Doors creaked open on their own, and the whispers in the hallway grew louder, more insistent. One stormy night, her husband returned home to find her in the basement, surrounded by dusty boxes and old belongings that had been left behind by previous owners. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale and gaunt, but her eyes burned with a fervor he didn't recognize. "You have to see this," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. She held up a faded photograph she had found tucked inside an old book. It was a black and white image of Marilyn Monroe sitting on a chaise lounge, smiling softly. But there was something off. Scribbled on the back of the photo in faint pencil were the word, "The key is where the light never fades." Her husband frowned. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know," she replied, clutching the photograph tightly. "But I think she's trying to tell us something. This house is holding onto her secrets." That night, as the storm raged outside, the woman couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of the wind howling through the trees outside. Then, she heard it, a faint tapping, like fingernails drumming against glass. She sat up, heart pounding, and realized it was coming from the window. She drew back the curtain and froze. Standing just beyond the glass was a figure, her form barely visible in the rain and darkness. The woman blinked, and the figure was gone, leaving only the faint outline of a handprint on the glass, small and delicate. The next morning, the couple decided to explore the house further. The phrase on the photograph nagged at her, "The key is where the light never fades." It had to mean something. They started with the living room, pulling books from shelves, tapping on walls, and peering behind furniture. Hours passed with no success, but as the afternoon sun began to set, the woman noticed something odd about the fireplace. The light from the window hit the mantel just right, revealing a faint discoloration in the stonework, as if something had been sealed behind it. She ran her fingers along the edges and found a small indentation, a hidden latch. With a trembling hand, she pressed it, and a section of the stone popped loose, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside was a small, velvet-lined box. She opened it carefully and gasped. It contained a single key, old and tarnished, along with a folded note. The note, written in the same hurried handwriting as before, simply said, "The truth will set me free." "What truth?" her husband asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before she could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the faint scent of Chanel No. 5 filled the air. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken, converging at the far end of the living room. Slowly, they formed the shape of a woman, Marilyn, her face pale and sad, her eyes filled with a silent plea. She raised her hand and pointed toward the key, her figure flickering like a candle in the wind. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone, leaving the couple in a silence so profound it felt deafening. The woman held the key tightly, her mind racing. Whatever it unlocked, it wasn't in the house. It was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. But as she looked at her husband, She realized they weren't the only ones searching. Someone or something wanted to keep this truth buried. And now that they had the key, the real danger was just beginning. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The couple didn't sleep that night. The key sat on the coffee table between them, its tarnished surface gleaming faintly under the dim light of a single lamp. The house felt alive with an energy they couldn't place, like it was holding its breath, waiting for their next move. "What could it open?" the husband asked, his voice a hushed whisper, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something in the walls. "I don't know," the woman replied, her eyes never leaving the key. "But Marilyn, she's leading us somewhere. I think she needs us to follow." By morning, they decided to start digging into the house's history, scouring public records and old archives. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. The property's original owner had been a reclusive Hollywood producer with a reputation for shady dealings. Rumors swirled about illicit affairs, missing actresses, and hidden fortunes. It was said he kept a private vault somewhere on the grounds, though no one ever found it. As they pieced together the fragments of history, they noticed something chilling. Marilyn had ties to this producer early in her career. She had attended parties at his estate, and some whispered she had confided in him during her darkest moments. But after her death, his name vanished from the records, as though someone had erased his connection to her entirely. Late that evening, as they pored over a stack of old newspapers, the woman noticed something strange in one of the photos, a shadow in the background of an image taken at one of those infamous Hollywood parties. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably there. A shape that looked like a small, ornate door set into the wall behind the fireplace of what appeared to be this very house. "It's here," she breathed, her pulse quickening. "The vault, it has to be here." They rushed to the living room and examined the walls around the fireplace more closely. Hours passed as they tapped, measured, and inspected every inch. Finally, they found it. A narrow seam in the plaster, nearly invisible, running in a perfect rectangle. Using a crowbar, they pried the false wall away to reveal a hidden door, its surface engraved with symbols they couldn't decipher. The key fit perfectly into the rusted lock, but as the woman turned it, the room seemed to groan around them, the temperature dropping once again. The scent of Chanel No. 5 filled the air, stronger this time, almost suffocating. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. A cold draft rushed up from below, carrying with it the faint sound of distant whispers, many voices, overlapping, rising and falling in an otherworldly cadence. "Do we go down?" the husband asked, his voice trembling. "We have to," she replied, clutching a flashlight as they descended into the depths. The stairs seemed to go on forever, winding deeper and deeper into the earth. The whispers grew louder, taking on a rhythmic, almost chant-like quality. Finally, they reached the bottom and stepped into a cavernous room lit by the eerie glow of an old Hollywood spotlight, still flickering faintly after all these years. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it sat a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. Beside it was a glass case containing a reel of film, the label marked only with a single word, "Truth." The woman reached for the journal, her hand shaking. As her fingers touched the leather, the spotlight flickered and went out, plunging them into complete darkness. In the silence, a single voice rang out, clear and mournful, echoing through the room. "You weren't supposed to find this." The flashlight flickered to life, and standing in the corner of the room was a figure not Marilyn, but a man in an old-fashioned suit, his face obscured by shadow. He took a step forward, his voice low and menacing. "Some secrets should stay buried." And then, from the staircase above, came the sound of footsteps, dozens of them, echoing down into the darkness. The couple froze, their eyes locked on the shadowy figure at the edge of the room. His presence was suffocating, a darkness that seemed to bleed into the very air around him. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the steady march of a single person, but an erratic chorus, heavy, shuffling, some fast, some dragging, as if a crowd was descending the staircase in a frenzy. The woman clutched the journal tightly to her chest, instinctively taking a step back toward her husband. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure tilted his head slightly, the faint glint of eyes barely visible in the shadows. A keeper, he said, his voice as cold as the draft in the room. This truth was never meant to see the light of day. She was warned. She? The husband asked, his voice cracking. Marilyn, the figure replied. She knew too much, and now so do you. Before they could respond, the footsteps reached the threshold of the room. From the darkness of the staircase emerged figures not fully solid, their forms flickering like the light from an old film projector. They were people, or at least they had been men and women in formal attire, their faces blank, eyes hollow. Each figure moved with a strange, disjointed rhythm, as though they were puppets controlled by invisible strings. The couple stumbled back, pressing themselves against the cold stone wall. The figures began to form a circle around the pedestal, their hollow eyes fixed on the journal and the film reel. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Amid the noise, the woman thought she could hear fragments of words, pleas, warnings, accusations, all blending into a single, unnerving chorus. The shadowy man stepped closer to the pedestal, his presence sending a wave of cold through the room. This is your last chance, he said, his tone almost pitying. Leave the journal. Leave the reel. Forget this place. If you take them, you will never escape what follows. The woman's grip tightened on the journal, her resolve hardening. She wanted us to find this. She wanted the truth to come out. And what do you think will happen if it does? The man said sharply, his shadow stretching toward her like a living thing. Do you think the world is ready for what she knew? For what she suffered to keep hidden? The whispers grew louder, angrier. The flickering figures began to move closer, their forms shifting and contorting, as though they were unraveling. The woman's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let go. Something deep within her told her this was bigger than fear, bigger than them. Marilyn's voice had been silenced for too long. Suddenly, the journal grew warm in her hands, as if reacting to her defiance. The whispers fell silent, and the flickering figures froze. The shadowy man stiffened, his form darkening, as though he was losing substance. A low rumble echoed through the room, the ground trembling beneath their feet. What's happening? The husband shouted, grabbing her arm. I don't know, she cried, clutching the journal tighter. The pedestal began to crack, and the reel of film trembled within its glass case. A blinding light burst forth from the journal, illuminating the cavern and forcing the shadowy man and the flickering figures to retreat. But instead of disappearing, they began to merge, their forms twisting together into something far more terrifying, a towering, grotesque shape that filled the room with an oppressive darkness. The woman felt the journal pull at her hands, as though it had a will of its own. She opened it instinctively, and the pages flipped wildly, stopping on a single entry. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible, but one line stood out, written in bold, jagged letters. The light will reveal them, but only the brave can face what comes next. And then, from somewhere deep within the house above them, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone singing. A voice so familiar, so achingly beautiful, it cut through the darkness like a blade. Marilyn's voice. The monstrous shadow recoiled, writhing as the light from the journal intensified, but the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, until it seemed to envelop the room. The woman turned to her husband, tears streaming down her face. She's here. She's helping us. But helping us do what? He shouted, as the room began to collapse around them, the air thick with a battle between light and dark. Neither of them noticed the glass case shatter, the reel of film rolling free onto the floor, spinning as though alive, its label glinting ominously in the flickering light. The room quaked violently, dust and shards of stone raining down from above. The monstrous shadow writhed, its form unraveling under the relentless glow of the journal and Marilyn's ethereal voice. The couple clung to each other, their eyes darting between the collapsing cavern and the reel of film spinning wildly on the floor. The woman knew instinctively what she had to do. The film, she shouted over the cacophony. It's the final piece. We have to play it. Her husband hesitated, staring at the ominous reel as if it might explode. But the look in her eyes, desperate yet resolute, propelled him forward. He grabbed the reel, its metal cold and vibrating in his hands, and they ran toward the staircase as the ground beneath them began to crack. The flickering figures shrieked, their distorted forms clawing at the couple as they ascended. The shadowy man loomed at the base of the stairs, his voice a guttural growl. "You don't understand what you're unleashing. You'll damn us all." But Marilyn's voice rose above his threats, clear and unwavering, a melody so haunting and beautiful it drowned out the chaos. The woman felt a surge of courage, as though the spirit of the late star was guiding her steps. They burst into the living room, slamming the hidden door behind them as the basement collapsed in a thunderous roar. Panting, they looked around frantically. The journal in the woman's hands pulsed with light, and she flipped to another page. A crude drawing of an old projector filled the center of the page, with a single word scrawled beneath it. "Reveal." "Where's the projector?" the woman asked, her voice frantic. Her husband's eyes darted around the room before landing on a corner obscured by old furniture. They shoved aside a dusty cabinet to reveal a vintage film projector, its metal frame tarnished but intact. Without hesitation, he threaded the reel onto the machine, fumbling with the switches until the light flickered on, casting a beam onto the far wall. The film began to play. Grainy footage of Marilyn Monroe appeared, her face solemn, her eyes filled with an anguish that seemed to transcend the screen. She sat in what appeared to be the very room they were standing in, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," she said, her voice trembling but determined, "it means they failed to bury the truth. They silenced me, destroyed my name, and hid the things I wasn't supposed to know. But the world deserves to see. You deserve to see." The screen shifted to show documents, contracts signed under duress, photographs of clandestine meetings, and evidence of dark dealings involving powerful men in Hollywood and beyond. Each image was more damning than the last, a web of corruption, control, and cruelty that painted a chilling picture of the forces that had surrounded Marilyn in her final days. As the film played, the house began to shake again, but this time it wasn't collapsing. It was transforming. The walls shimmered, the air electrified with energy, and the whispers that had once been disjointed now became a unified cry for justice. The flickering figures reappeared, but instead of attacking, they stood silently, their forms solidifying. They were people, men and women who had been wronged, silenced, forgotten. The shadowy man reemerged, his form now fractured and weakened. "You don't know what you've done," he snarled. "This truth will destroy everything." The woman stepped forward, the journal still glowing in her hands. "No," she said firmly. "It will set you free." The final frames of the film showed Marilyn again, her expression softer now, almost at peace. "To the ones brave enough to uncover this," she said, her voice breaking, "thank you. I hope you find the justice I never could." The projector clicked off, and the room was plunged into silence. The figures began to dissolve into soft, golden light, their faces no longer anguished but serene. The oppressive darkness lifted, leaving the air clear and still. Even the shadowy man faded, his final words a whisper. Perhaps it was time. As dawn broke outside, the couple sat in the living room, holding each other in the quiet aftermath. The journal and the reel were gone, as if they had served their purpose and vanished with the ghosts of the past. In the weeks that followed, an anonymous package arrived at a major news outlet, containing digitized footage of the film. The revelations shook the world, sparking investigations that toppled long-standing power structures and gave voice to stories long buried. The couple moved out of the Brentwood house soon after, unable to bear the weight of its history. But they left knowing they had done what Marilyn had asked. The truth was free, and so was she. Occasionally, in the dead of night, the woman would think she heard a soft, familiar hum, Marilyn's voice, carrying on the breeze, no longer mournful but filled with gratitude. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.